After the divorce, she didn't cry in public. She didn't post quotes. She didn't tell her side of the story to anyone who would listen. She simply went quiet. People assumed silence meant she had lost, that she was too weak to explain herself, too broken to defend her name. But silence wasn't weakness. It was survival. While everyone watched him move on, laughing louder, living bigger, speaking freely, she learned how to breathe without being heard. No arguments, no messages left unread, no public goodbye. It's just a woman carrying the weight of a life that ended without closure. What no one knew is that silence was doing something powerful inside her. Because while he was busy proving he was fine, she was quietly becoming someone he would never recognize again. The day he heard her name, it wasn't in anger. It wasn't in gossip. It wasn't followed by pity. It was spoken with respect. And in that moment, everything he believed about her, about who won, who lost, who survived, collapsed. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about restraint. About what happens when someone walks away from you, and instead of chasing them, you choose dignity. Stay with this story until the end, because sometimes the loudest answers come from the quietest people. And sometimes, the moment someone finally hears your name again, it's the moment they realize they never truly knew you at all. When the divorce papers were signed, people expected a reaction. They waited for tears, for anger, for explanations. They expected her to defend herself, but she didn't. She walked out of the office quietly, holding the same bag she had carried in. No dramatic pause, no last look back. To the world, it looked like she accepted defeat. But what no one saw was how heavy that silence was. At home, the walls felt unfamiliar. Not empty, just quiet in a way that pressed against her chest. Every room reminded her of conversations that never finished. She had given everything to that marriage. Her time, her plans, her sense of self. She had believed love meant compromise, that patience would eventually be rewarded, that staying quiet during disrespect would somehow save the relationship. So when it ended, she didn't feel anger first. She felt confusion. Not because he left, but because she had stayed for so long, hoping he would choose her back. Friends asked questions she couldn't answer. Family offered advice she wasn't ready to hear. Tell your side, don't let him control the narrative. People are talking. She heard all of it. And still, she said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say, but because every explanation felt like begging to be understood. And she was tired of begging. She learned quickly that silence makes people uncomfortable. They fill it with assumptions. They decide who you are without asking. Some said she was weak. Others said she must have done something wrong. She let them believe whatever helped them sleep, because the truth was, she was using that silence to survive. Every morning, she woke up with a weight in her chest that didn't fade with sunlight. She went to work on autopilot. She smiled when required. She cried only when she was sure no one would hear. There were nights she replayed conversations, wondering where she lost herself, wondering how someone could leave so easily after being everything to you. But instead of turning that pain outward, she folded it inward. She began rebuilding quietly, not in dramatic ways. No grand announcements, just small decisions, waking up on time, eating properly, learning to sit with her thoughts without running from them. She stopped checking his social media, stopped asking mutual friends for updates, stopped waiting for closure from someone who had already moved on. And slowly, without applause, without witnesses, she started becoming someone new. Not stronger overnight, not healed completely, but awake. And that quiet awakening was something no one noticed. Yet. At first, her new life felt fragile, like something that could fall apart if she breathed too loudly. She had no blueprint for starting over, no instructions for how to exist as someone who had been erased from a shared future. Every day demanded strength she wasn't sure she had. She learned quickly that rebuilding in silence is lonely work. There were no celebrations. No one applauded the small victories. When she paid her bills on time for the first time alone, no one noticed. When she went an entire day without crying, no one knew. And maybe that was the point. She stopped measuring progress by how much pain she felt. Instead, she measured it by how much peace she could hold. They were setbacks. Moments when a familiar song or a shared memory knocked the air out of her lungs. Moments when she almost reached for her phone, tempted to reopen a door that had already closed, but she didn't, because silence had become her boundary. While she was learning how to live again, he was busy being seen. New photos, new places, new people filling the space she once occupied. To outsiders, it looked like he had moved on effortlessly, like he had escaped something heavy and found freedom. And she saw it too. Not because she searched for it, but because life has a way of showing you what you trying to avoid. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had she imagined the depth of what they shared? Had she been the only one holding on? Those thoughts hurt more than the divorce itself. But instead of letting them consume her, she leaned into the work of becoming. She took on responsibilities she once shared.
Yes.
She learned skills she'd never thought she'd need. She discovered a quiet confidence in doing things alone. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't inspiring. It was necessary. Days turned into months. Months into a year. And something unexpected happened. She stopped waiting for his absence to stop hurting. She stopped needing validation from a past that no longer existed. Her silence changed shape. It was no longer a shield. It became a foundation. She didn't talk about what she had been through, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined her. People began to notice subtle changes. The way she carried herself, the calm in her voice, the certainty in her decisions. No one connected it to the pain she had survived. They saw only the result, not the process. And somewhere, without realizing it, she crossed a line from enduring life to choosing it. She didn't know it then, but the quiet strength she was building was preparing her for a moment that would test everything she had learned. A moment when the past would suddenly speak her name again and force her to decide whether silence was still her power, or something she had outgrown. The moment didn't announce itself. It never does. It arrived quietly, disguised as an ordinary day, one she almost didn't attend. She was invited to the event last minute. Nothing special, just another professional gathering, another room full of conversations she wasn't eager to join. If this were the woman she used to be, she would have declined. She would have chosen comfort over presence. But she went. Not because she wanted recognition, but because she no longer avoided rooms that once made her feel small. She walked in calmly, unaware that somewhere across the room, the past was about to catch up with her. He wasn't looking for her. In fact, she was the last person he expected to see or hear about. He had built a story in his mind where she faded quietly into obscurity, where silence meant weakness, where her absence confirmed his importance. So when he heard her name spoken clear, confident, followed by admiration, his attention snapped instantly. He turned. At first he thought he misheard, but then the name came again, this time with respect. With acknowledgement, people were listening. They weren't whispering. They weren't pitying. They were impressed. Confusion settled in his chest. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. He searched the room until he saw her. She looked different, not in appearance, but in presence. She stood comfortably, speaking with ease, unaware of the weight her name now carried in his ears. There was no hesitation in her voice, no trace of the woman who once waited for his attention. And suddenly, he felt something unfamiliar. Displacement. The realization that life had continued without him, and not only continued, but improved. He remembered the way she used to shrink herself to fit his world, the way she stayed quiet so he could speak louder. The room leaned toward her. He tried to interrupt the moment by inserting himself into the conversation. She stayed silent because she was rebuilding. He wasn't part of that process. For the first time since the divorce, he felt irrelevant. The success he chased felt thin. The noise he surrounded himself with felt empty. Because standing there, watching her exist so fully without him, he realized something devastating. He hadn't escaped the marriage. He had walked away from the version of her who would never again belong to his past. And that understanding followed him long after the room moved on, a quiet echo of a name he once ignored, now spoken with a respect he could no longer claim. She felt it before she understood it. The shift. Not in the room, but inside herself. As the conversations moved on and the moment passed, she stepped away quietly, letting the noise fade behind her. There was no rush of victory, no surge of satisfaction. It's just a calm realization settling into place. She hadn't come there to be seen by him. She hadn't rebuilt her life to make him regret anything. And that truth mattered more than any reaction she could have provoked. For a long time after the divorce, she believed healing would arrive as a single moment, a conversation, an apology, a chance to finally say everything she held back. But standing there now, she understood something deeper. Closure doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from distance. She thought back to the woman she once was, the one who waited for replies, who measured her worth by how needed she felt, who believed silence meant losing. That woman felt far away now, not erased, just complete. She realized that the power of her silence had never been about endurance. It was about choice. She chose not to explain herself to people who were committed to misunderstanding her. She chose not to perform her pain for sympathy. She chose not to rebuild her life around someone else's absence. And those choices had quietly reshaped her. Across the room, he stood still for a moment longer, watching her from a distance he could no longer cross. There was nothing left to say. He had missed the window where explanations mattered, missed the time when apologies could have changed anything. Life had moved forward without waiting for him to catch up. She felt no need to look back, no urge to measure her progress by his reaction, because the moment wasn't about him hearing her name. It was about her no longer needing it to be heard. As she walked out into the evening air, she felt lighter not because she had proven anything, but because she had finally stopped carrying what wasn't hers to hold. Some people confuse silence with submission, but silence, when chosen, is clarity. That was the lesson hidden beneath everything she endured. Not every story needs confrontation. Not every ending needs an audience. Sometimes the most powerful closure is living well without explanation.
Ow.
If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Some losses don't break us, they reveal us.